The handcuff bit into my wrist before I even understood what was happening. Cold metal, ratcheting tight, click after click after click. I remember the smell of the grill smoke still on my shirt, the paper plate of untouched potato salad sitting on the porch railing beside me. My knees hit the welcome mat, the one that said grillin' and chillin' that I'd bought myself as a joke for years ago. Behind me, through the screen door, I heard my son's voice, flat and cold as a deposition. "Officer, he's been unstable for months. We just want him safely assessed." Assessed? Like I was a piece of property. Like I was a number on a spreadsheet. And I knelt there on my own daughter-in-law's porch, on Father's Day, in handcuffs, wondering how exactly I'd raised a boy who could say that sentence without his voice shaking even once. My name is Walter Kemp. I'm 67 years old, and for 34 years I built something out of nothing. Kemp Precision Tooling, a machine shop in Dayton, Ohio that started in a rented garage with one lathe and a $4,200 loan from my father-in-law, and grew into a company worth $6.8 million, employing 41 people. My wife, Carol, passed away 11 years ago. Since then, it had been me, my business, and my son, Derek. Derek was 38. Handsome, sharp-tongued, the kind of charming that made people forget to ask follow-up questions. 3 years earlier, I'd made him Chief Operating Officer, with a signed, notarized plan to transfer him 60% ownership over 5 years if the company hit certain benchmarks. I'd co-signed a $340,000 mortgage on his house in Oakwood. I'd paid for his wedding. I'd paid for 2 rounds of IVF. I tell you this because every dollar matters to what comes next. Because on Father's Day, the son I'd handed a company and a house and a decade of unconditional love had a police officer walk me out of his front yard in handcuffs, while he stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and said the sentence that would replay in my head every night for 6 weeks. "I wish you'd never been my dad." It started 3 months before Father's Day. On a Tuesday, I wasn't supposed to be at the office. My flight to Phoenix got canceled at the gate, so I drove to the shop instead. The lights in my old office, the one Derek had taken over, were on. Blinds shut. I heard laughter through the door, the loose, unguarded kind people only do when they think no one's listening. "He actually thinks the Peterson contract is still active," Derek was saying. I heard a glass clink, my Woodford Reserve, the bottle I kept for closing deals. "Old man doesn't even open his own mail anymore." I have Sandra intercepted. Ashley's voice, laughing. "God, Walt still thinks he runs this place." "He funded this place," Derek said. "That's the only thing he still does." I stood in that hallway in my own building and felt something in my chest go very quiet and very still. Not rage, just a door closing somewhere inside me. I went home, poured 2 fingers of bourbon from a different bottle, and started paying attention. I quietly opened a new P.O. box in the company's legal name and pulled the mail logs. Within 11 days I found it. 3 vendor payment notices, 2 IRS letters, and a certified letter from our biggest client, Hallbrook Industries, threatening to terminate our contract over missed deliveries. All intercepted, none of it ever reaching my desk. I asked Derek about it, keeping my voice easy. "Did we ever hear back from Hallbrook?" "Oh, that's handled, Dad," he said smoothly. "Procurement compliance flagged our SKU codes for an internal audit, totally routine. Already looped in their ops director." I thanked him. I felt the second door close. 2 weeks later, I pulled statements on our secondary operating account, the one Derek managed for vendor flexibility. In 14 months, $187,000 had moved out to something called Kemp Family Holdings LLC. I'd never heard of it. Derek's signature, alone. I asked him, plain confused. "What's Kemp Family Holdings?" "That's a tax shelter entity, Dad. Our CPA set it up for depreciation flow-through on the CNC equipment. Saves us probably 60 grand a year. I can walk you through the K-1, but it's pretty dense." I told him that sounded smart. Then I called our actual CPA, Renata, who'd done our books for 19 years. She'd never heard of it. The following Sunday, dropping off a toolbox at his house, I heard them through the cracked garage door. "He bought it," Derek was laughing. "That sounds smart, son." I could tell him the moon was made of drywall, and he'd nod. "Ashley, how long till the transfer's done and we don't need him signing anything?" 8 months, Derek said. Then I file the ownership change, and once I'm sole signer, Dad can go be retired somewhere and stop asking questions about accounts he doesn't understand. I stood there holding a toolbox that suddenly weighed 200 pounds. I hired a private investigator, Frank Delacroix. Within 3 weeks, he had the full picture. Kemp Family Holdings wasn't a tax shelter. It was a Delaware LLC. Derek, as sole owner, formed 14 months earlier. The $187,000 had gone into a brokerage account, then partly into a down payment on a Michigan lake house under Ashley's maiden name, and partly into recurring payments, $41,000 over 10 months, to a woman named Crystal Voss, memo line reading rent. My son wasn't just stealing from me. He was funding an apartment for a mistress with embezzled money. That's when I decided, no yelling, no confrontation that would let him lawyer up and disappear the LLC. I was going to disappear myself, as a threat. I started forgetting things on purpose. Calling Ashley Amanda at Thanksgiving. Asking the same question twice. I let my shoulders round forward. I stopped wearing Carol's watch and put on an old cardigan. I called Derek boss in a soft, half-defeated voice. Inside, I was sharper than I'd been in a decade. I needed him to believe the walls were closing in on my mind, not his crimes. A confused old man doesn't get accused. He gets pitted and underestimated. I think Dad's really declining. I heard Derek tell Ashley one evening, 3 feet from my napping recliner. Might actually work in our favor with the transfer paperwork. I kept my eyes shut and thought, yes, son, let it work in your favor, right up until it doesn't. I set the bait in April. I told Derek, rambling, half-lucid, that I'd decided to move the company's remaining $2.1 million in retained earnings into a personal trust, and I'd have the paperwork ready by Father's Day to sign in front of the family. It was a lie, but I knew it would make him believe the company was about to fall into his lap months ahead of schedule. Frank installed a small recorder in my sunroom, where Derek and Ashley liked to talk business. I left a new phone for pictures of the grandkids face down on the side table, recording every visit. On June 12th, 5 days before Father's Day, it caught this. Once he signs that trust paperwork Sunday, we don't need him functional anymore. If he gets weird about it, we say he's unstable. Ashley's cousin's a nurse. She can write something up. Worst case, we get him assessed, maybe committed for a few weeks. Just long enough. Ashley. And Crystal's already got the LLC paperwork ready to file the second the trust clears. I sat in my kitchen with the recording still running in my palm, and for the first time in months, my pulse ticked up. Not from fear. From readiness. Father's Day arrived warm and bright. Derek and Ashley hosted a backyard barbecue. 20-some guests, including my brother Hank, Renata, and, at my quiet invitation, Frank, sitting by the drink table with a folder in his lap. I wore the cardigan. I let Derek take my elbow like I needed the help. Derek raised his glass to the yard. Dad's finally getting his affairs in order. Real proud of him for facing reality. Laughter. Ashley squeezed his arm. It's about time. Some of us were starting to worry we'd be changing his diapers before he changed his will. The yard laughed. I let it land. Then I stood up slowly. No shake in my hands. No shuffle. Back straight. My voice, when it came, was quiet enough that the whole yard leaned in. Before we sign anything, I want to thank my son for teaching me something this year. Derek smiled. Anytime, Dad. I want to thank him for the 8-month countdown to my irrelevance. Kemp Family Holdings LLC filed 14 months ago in Delaware. For the $187,000 that became a lake house in Michigan under Ashley's maiden name. For the $41,000 in rent payments to Crystal Voss, whose own Delaware filing is pending. Time for the moment I signed a trust that doesn't exist. The yard went silent. Derek's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Ashley's face drained of color. I want to thank him, I said, voice never rising, for the recording where he explained that once I signed, we don't need him functional anymore, and that if I got weird about it, Ashley's cousin would write up paperwork to have me committed. Dad, I'm not finished. Frank stood, handed copies to Hank, to Renata, to 2 guests from Derek's own law firm. 3 months of documented embezzlement, wire fraud, and forged signatures totaling $228,000. Renata can confirm no legitimate CPA ever filed this LLC. And this, I pulled the folded, empty trust paperwork from my cardigan pocket, is the promise my son built his entire plan around. I tore it in half, slowly. The sound of ripping paper was the only noise in that backyard. I let both halves fall onto the patio table, next to the potato salad. 2 unmarked cars pulled into the driveway on schedule. Derek Kemp? We need to ask you some questions about wire transfers from Kemp Precision Tooling. Derek looked at me, his face collapsing. You did this on Father's Day. No, son, I said. You did this. I just chose the day to end it. In the weeks that followed, the consequences arrived like a slow tide. Derek was charged with 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of forgery. Facing Frank's documentation and the recording, he took a plea. $228,000 restitution, 5 years probation, permanent removal from any corporate office in Ohio. Ashley filed for divorce 11 days later. The Michigan Lake house, bought with stolen money, was seized as part of restitution, and with it went the only thing she'd apparently stayed for. Crystal Voss's LLC filing was voided before it cleared. Derek's firm let her go once the affair became known. Ashley's cousin, the nurse who'd allegedly agreed to falsify an assessment, was reported to the state nursing board. At Kemp Precision, I called an all-hands meeting that Monday, told my 41 employees the truth, personally guaranteed every paycheck and benefit, promoted Renata to interim COO, and gave everyone a one-time $1,000 bonus for showing up and doing honest work in a season when honesty was hard to find in this building. Nobody lost a job. The company came out cleaner and stronger than it had been in years. 6 weeks later, on a gray October evening, my doorbell rang. Derek stood on my porch, soaked through, a single duffel bag at his feet, the last of what he'd been allowed to take before the bank finalized the sale of his house. Thinner, hollow-eyed. Dad, I have nowhere else to go. I looked at my son for a long moment, the boy I taught to ride a bike 30 years ago, and felt grief, not hatred. Grief for the son I thought I'd raised, standing in the shape of the one I actually had. You had everything, Derek. A company, a house, a father who paid for your wedding and your wife's fertility treatments and never once asked for anything back but honesty. You traded it all for a lake house and a woman named Crystal and a plan to lock me away so you wouldn't have to look me in the eye while you did it. Dad, please. I hope you rebuild something. I truly do. But it won't be built on my roof, and it won't be built with my money. Not anymore. I closed the door gently, the way you close a door on a chapter, not slam it on a person. Through the window, I watched him stand in the rain a moment before turning and walking back toward whatever was left of his life. Inside, my brother Hank looked up from the crossword he'd been pretending to do. You all right? I will be, I said. And for the first time in a year, I believed it. Here's what I learned, sitting in that quiet house. Love doesn't obligate you to be blind, and family doesn't get a permanent pass to exploit you just because you share blood or a last name. The people who truly love you build with you. They don't count down the days until you're small enough to erase. If someone in your life is waiting for you to become weak enough to control, don't give them a reason to keep waiting. Watch. Wait. And when the moment is right, tell the truth calmly. Because the truth, said quietly, is always louder than their lies shouted in a crowded room. If this story hit home for you, tell me in the comments. What would you have done differently on that porch? Hit like if you believe honesty always outlasts arrogance. Subscribe for more stories like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.